Cool. So thank you for joining me, Grace, to talk about some of your experiences in your various internships, your various product management internships. Before we get started, do you want to give a quick intro about yourself, some of your past experiences?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, David, so much for having me. I have followed PM Tech Lessons since the beginning, so it's very exciting to be here. My name is Grace, and I am wrapping up my last semester of undergrad at Northeastern University in Boston with a major in business marketing. And I have had a lot of experiences in product management, luckily, in college. My first was a product management co-op. It was a 6-month internship at GE Lighting. And from there, I did another semester of college, and then I did a 3-month virtual product management internship with Salesforce. And then I did a 5-month virtual co-op. It was also an internship with Blue Wolf, an IBM company, as a business analyst doing Salesforce implementation, actually. So that taught me even more about Salesforce and convinced me that, Salesforce is really the future of enabling so many future companies to connect with their customers. So therefore, I'm returning to Salesforce full time after graduating this May. So I'm very excited to continue in product management there. And I always strive to give back to other aspiring product managers. So this is an exciting opportunity to share my story and what I've learned.
Yeah, yeah. And in between all of that, you're also one of the founders of Product Buzz, right? This is a community that we're all very well familiar with, growing very, very rapidly and putting out amazing content on at an amazing clip. So just wanted to shout that out there as well.
Thank you. Yes, we're a virtual community for aspiring product people. So join us if you're interested. I'm sure David will share the link.
Awesome. Cool. So just to dive right into some of our topics here, I want to ask you, what misconceptions about PM internships did you want to clear up? I myself have never had a PM internship, so I can't really speak to this, but you have, very significant experience here. I want to say, what kind of misconceptions out there have you heard, or have you encountered, and they just want to clear out for the audience?
Yeah. So when I first learned about product management, I had a lot of these same misconceptions. So some of these are that product management is only for people with technical backgrounds. So people who really understand computer science, computer engineering, or other STEM subjects very well. And that product management is only offered by big technology companies, Facebook, Amazon, Google, and that they're only offered by software companies, and that they're also only for undergraduate college students living in the United States. So there is some degree of validity to each of those misconceptions, but the thing is, they're not entirely encompassing of like the reality of product management. So the first one, that product management is only for people with technical backgrounds. That the reason why this is believed by some individuals is because when product management was first starting out as a discipline, mainly by Google, Google was really searching for product managers who had technical knowledge because of the nature of their products, the nature of their teams, and their culture. And so, I mean, still to this day, if you look at a Google APM job description, you'll see that they really like people with those technical skills. But there are so many other companies out there that want individuals who are really great in business areas like marketing or sales or strategy, or people who are really great in design like UX and UI design. And so you can really bring so many different skills to the table that, yes, even if the job description says that they would like somebody with certain technical skills, as long as you can demonstrate that you're someone who is constantly eager to learn more about technology, despite not having a technical background, I think that's really important to emphasize when recruiting. And then other things like, oh, only big tech companies offer PM internships or new grad PM jobs. Not true. Startups, medium-sized companies alike. You go on LinkedIn, you'll see there's so many different types of companies in different industries that are looking for PMs. And you don't have to be just an undergrad student. I've had and I've seen product manager interns and new grads who are MBA students or have other grad degrees and are actively pursuing them or just recently completed them. So that is an option. And it's not just in the US, there are product management jobs in many other countries. So be on the lookout and be open-minded about what you see out there.
Those are all great points. And I really like the first one you made, that you don't have to be strictly technical, right? One of the great advantages of the role is that it's so interdisciplinary, and you can bring in these aspects of all these other fields, and having like deep expertise in something other than the specific technical coding programming aspects, like you mentioned, design, UX, these sorts of things. Now that's often seen as a strength, in its own way. And just kind of being able to bring that in and mix it in really is something that you can use to your advantage.
Yes.
I love that. Cool. So when you were an intern, so you already went over the summary of your internship pasts. When you were an intern, what were your goals, while you were there as an intern, and your goals to get out of that internship as a whole?
Yeah, for sure. So my most recent internship being Salesforce, my goals to firstly, of course, perform really well on my projects and ensure that whatever future vision that my manager and the team had set out for the project, that I was contributing in some way to that future vision, whether that be conducting primary and secondary research via interviews and surveys and focus groups and online research, or whether that be driving the product forward in the life cycle by assisting engineers with the development and clearing up any roadblocks for them to the best of my ability, or it be later on in the product lifecycle of like collecting feedback from customers about the products and continually iterating on the product's features. So that, of course, is a big component of any product internship, and as well as building relationships. Both at GE Lighting and at Salesforce, I made a very deliberate effort to get to know as many of my colleagues as possible, both within my team and outside of my team. At GE Lighting, I actually went all the way up to having lunches with some of the C-suite executives of the company, because there actually weren't that many people on the campus headquarters that I was working at. So like, of course, it was intimidating sitting there and talking to like the CEO of the company, but I learned experience that he's just as human as anyone else is at the company. And so that really was a humbling experience. And then at Salesforce, even though that was a virtual internship, I actually did over 60 virtual coffee chats with product managers, designers, engineers, directors, and fellow interns, of course. So getting to know people, build relationships, expand my network was another big goal. And then lastly, professional and personal growth and development, making sure that throughout my entire internship experience that I'm always upskilling myself, up-leveling myself, whether it be reading more books about product management or learning more about the technology that I was working with. For example, at Salesforce, we have so many products, and going online to the Trailhead website and doing modules to learn more about Salesforce's products and features and how to use those products. So, it's performing well on projects, it's building relationships, and it's the growth, professional and personal growth for me.
Yeah, tons of great points in there. To your first point, I think I love how you really kind of bought in and dove straight into the role, right? I know sometimes, especially in an internship setting, I never did PM internships, but in software internships, sometimes you're given kind of a scoped down project or something that's a little bit off to the side. And it's easy to get in the mindset of, oh, this is just an intern thing. It's not a real thing. You kind of feel like auxiliary to the team. And then, when that happens, it's easy to get into the spiral of, oh, well, I'm not going to take it seriously. I'm not going to give it my best effort. And these sorts of thoughts just kind of creep in, right? So I really like how you really just bought in and acted like a full member of the team, behaved as such. And that way you can really kind of, not only do you get a better feel of what the full-time role is like, but you also, get a better sense of, what is the team actually working towards? What does it feel to be bought into something like that? I think it's a really great mindset to take into it.
Thank you. Yeah. And, building off your point, it's not just about what initiative you take in order to feel like a true part of the team and of the company. But it's also, how does the team receive that? Do they receive you with open arms? Are they willing to advocate for you and allow you to have a, voice at the table in decision making? And I think that I got lucky enough where my 2 internships did allow me to feel like I had a voice at the table, to feel empowered and really inspired by who I was working alongside. So that's another factor to consider too.
Absolutely. I wanted to go back to your second point as well, where you mentioned you had lunches and coffee chats, but you said 60 people at Salesforce up to the C-suite at GE Lighting. This is something that is widely repeated kind of in interns. Use it to network, use it to talk to people. I want to ask a more tactical question for potential interns out there. What do you talk about in these calls? What do you ask the CEO of GE Lighting, for instance?
Yeah. So the questions that you ask are, of course, going to depend on who you're speaking to and what their area of expertise is and what their personality is. If you're talking to someone as senior as a CEO of a company, you're going to want to make sure that the questions are, of course, very professional in nature, and you can relate them to their experiences and how maybe you can learn from that. So for example, and honestly, this goes for like regardless of whether you're talking to someone so senior or like someone that's at the same exact level as you as an intern. But I love the question, like, what's your story? Can you tell me more about your career journey? And like, what led you to where you are now, both the great achievements, but also the rejections or failures or moments of low points. And I think the reason why I love that question is because as an intern, you're almost always going to suffer from imposter syndrome, because you're always going to be surrounded by people who are more knowledgeable and experienced and have very high credentials. But you can ask them to tell their story in a way that is vulnerable. It allows you to humanize them a little bit more, especially someone that's senior at the company. It allows you to see, okay, they're a human being just like I am, and they have emotions and they have a family and they have passions and dreams, but also, insecurities. So I love that question. And I also, of course, really love asking people for their advice. But before you go off and ask them for advice, kind of like sharing with them some context, right? Like, who are you? What are you struggling with? And then pose the question, and try to make that question one that hopefully they can answer, right? If you're asking a software engineer who has no experience in product management questions about product management, like they might be like, oh, I'll direct you to somebody else. So making sure you're utilizing the time effectively based on who you're speaking to, but approaching them in a way that is more genuine than, oh, how's the weather? But also like asking them for like their story. Like, I really love that.
That's fantastic. That's great. And it really makes these conversations feel more approachable, right? Now that you have this context and this framework around how do you want to approach it, what sorts of objectives are you looking for, on your side of the conversation, and really, it just makes that whole practice a little bit more approachable. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's really helpful. So you've done multiple internships. We've mentioned this many times already. How have your skills built upon each other, and kind of compounded as you went from one internship to the next?
Yeah. So when I was at GE Lighting, that was my very first product management experience. And I did not know, like on a very deep level, what product management was. I didn't know what it took to be a successful manager. And it wasn't until a couple months into that internship that I really felt like I had a good grasp on those two things. And then from there, I learned things that typical interns will learn, like navigating a really fast-paced environment, or becoming comfortable with a lot of ambiguity in your projects. But also, effective time management and becoming really autonomous in your work while also still being able to lean on your teammates when you are in need of help. But given that, that was like a product management internship, I also, of course, learned how to collaborate across many different teams in engineering, design, and business during multiple stages of the product lifecycle for our smart home lighting products. So this was very interesting because at GE Lighting, the smart home products that I was working with, not only do we have things like light bulbs and lamps and plugs that are a physical hardware product, but inside those physical hardware products, there's like firmware, and then there's like a mobile app that is connected to the smart products so that you can control those products via your smartphone or via voice assistants like Amazon Alexa or Google Home. And so because of the fact that I was working with both hardware and software and engineers and designers who understood both, I learned a lot about product management, I felt like from a more holistic standpoint. And there's certain challenges that you deal with when you're working with hardware that you don't deal with when working with software. Like hardware product management, you have like a longer life cycle because of the supply chain and production and manufacturing and distribution, and then later on like retail channels and things like that. So I thought that that was like a really neat experience and very like holistic in my first product management experience. And then I really gained an appreciation for how different product facing teams work and interact with each other, especially when they're pressed for time. And I learned, what practices it takes to make a successful product. For example, deeply empathizing with your customers. I did so many like interviews and focus groups while I was there. And so that was really interesting. And ruthless prioritization of future requests. So all of those things I took from GE Lighting to Salesforce. And then when I went to Salesforce, I was also out of my element because firstly, the internship was remote and I never got to meet any of my team members. And I was working with team members in different time zones. So, the challenges associated with that compounded on top of the fact that I was no longer working with B2C hardware software products. I was working with B2B software products. And so there I learned that I needed to learn how to continue to be adaptable and autonomous in my work, as well as accountable for the results that I produced, regardless of the fact of, me not sitting in the same room as my manager. And I also learned a lot about like how the B2B product management life cycle works and best practices that a PM does throughout that cycle. For example, collecting user research and feedback internally. That was different for me because I wasn't interacting with customers. I was working with like internal stakeholders. And lastly, the Salesforce internship not only taught me those like technical skills and product skills, but learning about what type of culture I want in a company. And that type of culture that I really enjoy is one that is shaped by a commitment to customer success, innovation, equality, trust, and transparency and empathy. So I learned a lot from there. And yeah, it was a really great experience.
Absolutely, it sounds like it. And one thing I want to point out, right, is that with this breadth of experience, hardware versus software, B2B versus B2C, virtual versus remote, all these different contrasting experiences, the goal is not to necessarily say, now that I've done both, I can, with equal confidence and competence do both of these, but rather now you have points of comparison, right? You can define that spectrum and you can say, well, here's a problem. I have these different tools I can apply to different situations and I can look through that, right? Being exposed to these different options so early on in your career is really an incredibly valuable experience, even if you never actually, work on a hardware product again, for instance, right? Just knowing that this exists and the set of problems that you can face is extremely valuable knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I encourage everyone listening to be open-minded to different types of products and industries and companies and cultures, because there is no such thing as wasted time or wasted effort. Every single experience that you have, whether in product management or elsewhere, teaches you something that you can compound and bring to your next experience. So I think that's like a very important thing to keep in mind, especially for college students. We often become very stubborn and say, okay, this is the only thing that I want to do. And if I don't do this, then like all is done. But no, like when I started college and when I was looking for my first internship, I was like pretty set on marketing. Like I was thinking, okay, I'm going to go just become a marketer. But then obviously I was led to product management, and I don't see the time in marketing as wasted though. Like there's so many like great concepts and skills in marketing that I carried over to product management. So that's something I didn't mention, but keep in mind as well.
Exactly. Going back to what we were saying earlier about how interdisciplinary the concept, the role is, it is hard to have such a thing as wasted time as a product manager. But having said that, if you were to redo your internships, what would you change?
That is a great question. So I try not to live with too many regrets. But if I were to look deeply within myself and reflect, firstly, with the GE Lighting internship, I wish I spent more time at the beginning of the internship and whenever I was given a new project to set up some quantitative metrics of success for myself and the project. Because by the time that I finished that internship, I realized that I did struggle with finding those quantitative metrics to put on my resume, because some of the products that I was working on were going to be launching much later after my internship was over, and those metrics wouldn't be available yet. Like for example, like how many users, how much revenue is generated, and so on. And I eventually was able to like capture some of those metrics, but the thing that I'm referring to is, for example, like as a product manager intern, you might be working with teammates on some user testing. Um, so basically testing products with beta users, alpha users before your product launches. And you want to make sure that you like set, okay, like what do you aim for the net promoter score to be, right? What do you aim for the customer satisfaction score to be? How many testers do you want to test this product? What other even qualitative measures of success can you capture to ensure that you're confident in your decision about launching this product to the market? And like, even if you can't set metrics like that, just really talking to your manager and saying, okay, what do you want to see out of this project by the time that I'm finished with it? And making sure that not only are you really clear with your manager about what is the end objective, but also what is the impact on the business that you're hoping to have out of this project, so that you can thoughtfully talk about the work that you did at future interviews as well, right? And then with Salesforce, I wish that before I entered the internship that I got Salesforce certified, because getting a Salesforce certification, it requires time. But it allows you to just gain such a deeper knowledge and appreciation for Salesforce's core products. And if I had that knowledge coming into the internship, I think I would have saved uh, a lot of time that was spent asking questions and looking up answers, and really like feeling stressed out about some of the work that I was doing. But it's okay, because like after my internship was over, I did get Salesforce certified. I took like the certification exam, and it was a very time consuming process, but I think it's worthwhile. And regardless of like whether you're working at Salesforce or anywhere else, making sure that you have that base knowledge of the products that you're working on in some capacity will really help.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? For all product managers, not even just interns. Salesforce itself is an institution, but even if you just are working on an app or on some sort of service, uh, having some sort of firsthand experience with that is essential as a product manager.
Mhm.
And I really like your point that you made about having a conversation with your manager at GE about talking about what sort of goals are you trying to achieve, how can you work towards those over the course of the internship, right? Your manager during an internship really is on your side. They're there to see you succeed, right? Like internships, they are built for the interns to succeed as much as they can. You want give them as many resources, give them as much support as you can, and so they're there to help you. And so having that conversation, setting the stage right at the beginning, gives you the maximum amount of time for you to like develop a plan, work on that plan, and ultimately achieve the goals that you both want to get out of the internship.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, thank you
Definitely.
so much. This has been a really great conversation. I kind of lived vicariously through your internships, your product internships, and learned so much from this conversation. So thank you, Grace.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, David, for your thoughtful questions. This is definitely something that I'm continually learning more about, like product management and navigating working with engineers and technical individuals on teams. And I'm very excited for what the future may hold, but I'm also someone who loves giving back and paying it forward to all the people that were on my journey who did help me get to where I am today. So if anyone watching this has any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or on the Product Buds Slack community. Actually, and I also joined Clubhouse recently, so you can find me on there as well.
Amazing. Well, hope to see you on Clubhouse sometime. And thank you
Yeah,
again so much.
yeah, of course.